"If I warm your bed, will you let us remain?" said poor alien mom, and that night everything changed. The frontier station had been silent for months. Its metallic corridors echoed with the faint hum of life support systems, a sound that reminded the few remaining humans that the station was not completely dead. Elias Ward walked carefully through the corridors, his boots making soft thuds against the cold metal floors. Dust and dim light painted the walls with a grayish glow. He had worked here for almost 5 years, overseeing the maintenance of systems that no longer served any purpose. Soon the station would be decommissioned, and he would return to Earth, leaving the empty halls and dying machines behind. Elias paused near the entrance to the residential wing. The area had been abandoned for weeks, and he usually avoided it. Something, though, made him glance toward one of the small rooms at the end of the corridor. A faint rustle came from inside, almost like the shuffling of cloth. He frowned, gripping the flashlight in his hand. The station was supposed to be empty. "Hello," Elias called softly. A sudden, nervous voice answered in a strange, broken language. It was soft, almost trembling. Elias' heart skipped. It was not human. From the shadows of the room, a small figure emerged. It was the size of a human child, but its skin shimmered with a pale, iridescent glow. Behind it, a larger figure stepped into view, a tall, thin being with wide, luminous eyes that reflected the dim light. The mother's movements were cautious, almost fearful, but there was a gentleness in her posture. Elias froze, unsure what to do. He had read about displaced alien refugees, but he had never met one. The station's protocols were clear. Aliens without proper clearance were not allowed to stay. Yet here they were, in desperate need of shelter. The mother spoke again, her voice shaky but filled with a strange hope. "Please, we have nowhere. Can we stay just one night?" Elias looked at her. She seemed exhausted. Her child clung to her, shivering slightly. The corners of the child's glowing eyes were wet, showing fear and uncertainty. Elias felt something stir inside him, a human instinct to protect, to help, to care. He took a deep breath. "One night," he said. "No one can know you're here, but you can stay for tonight." Relief washed over the mother's face. She bowed slightly and whispered something Elias did not understand. She and her child followed him quietly to his living quarters, careful not to touch anything. The small apartment smelled faintly of oil and metal. It was warm compared to the rest of the station, though still cold by normal standards. Elias led them to a small cot near the window. "This is all I can give," he said. "It's not much, but it will keep you warm." The mother nodded and placed her hands gently on the surface of the cot. Her body emitted a faint warmth that mingled with the station's heating system. It was subtle but noticeable. Elias watched, fascinated. He had never seen anything like it. Her presence seemed to make the room feel alive in a way that the hum of machines never could. "Eat," Elias said, setting down a small tray of rationed food. "You need something to keep your strength." They hesitated but eventually accepted, their hands moving carefully over the unfamiliar items. The child's large eyes followed Elias everywhere, curiosity mixing with wariness. Every movement the human made seemed to be studied, catalogued, and understood. Elias realized that despite their small size and fragile appearance, they were intelligent, attentive, and cautious, like animals that had learned to survive by watching others. For the first hour, no one spoke much. Elias watched them eat and felt a strange mix of awe and anxiety. He knew he was risking his career by sheltering them. If anyone discovered the aliens, it could be disastrous. Yet at that moment, he felt certain he had made the right choice. As the evening passed, the mother spoke again, this time in a language Elias could not understand. But her tone was soft, melodic, and calm. She gestured toward the walls, then toward herself, then toward Elias. Slowly, he realized she was trying to communicate something important. "It's cold," he said carefully. "You can stay close to the cot. It's the warmest place here." The mother nodded, moving closer to the cot. The child pressed against her side, shivering. Elias felt a pang of compassion. He had seen human refugees in similar situations, but this was different. These aliens were not like humans, yet they were seeking the same basic comfort, warmth, safety, and care. Night deepened, and the station's lights dimmed to conserve energy. The silence was broken only by the faint hum of life support systems and the occasional creak of the station's structure. Elias moved to his small workstation, pretending to work while keeping an eye on the room. He knew that sleep would come slowly tonight. The mother, sensing his watchful gaze, looked up at him. Her eyes glimmered in the dim light. Elias could see fear, gratitude, and something else, an unspoken understanding. They were all alone, far from home, trying to survive in a universe that often offered no mercy. Hours passed. The mother and child settled on the cot, their bodies glowing faintly in the darkness. Elias noticed that the warmth from their bodies was not just physical. It seemed to spread into the room, filling the small apartment with a sense of calm he had not felt in years. As he watched them, Elias thought about the protocols, the rules, the rigid regulations that defined human behavior in space. All of that felt distant and unimportant now. What mattered was this small family, shivering and vulnerable, and the choice he had made to protect them. By midnight, the station's temperature had dropped dangerously. The heating system, old and failing, struggled to keep the corridors warm. Elias knew that if the system failed entirely, the aliens might not survive the night. He hesitated, then made a decision. He opened the small vent near the cot and adjusted the airflow, directing more warm air toward them. The mother noticed immediately and gave a small nod of thanks. The child's eyes lit up with wonder at the warmth, and for a moment, Elias felt a rare happiness, the simple joy of helping, of making a difference. Time seemed to stretch as the night wore on. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, indifferent to the struggles of the small beings hiding inside the station. Elias thought of Earth, of humanity, and of the lessons that had been forgotten in the pursuit of progress. Here in this abandoned station, he remembered something essential, the value of compassion, the power of kindness, and the simple truth that life, any life, was worth protecting. By the early hours of the morning, Elias had grown tired. He sat back in his chair, watching the mother and child sleep. Their breathing was steady now, their small forms curled together on the cot. The glow of their bodies had faded slightly as their energy settled, but the warmth remained, subtle and comforting. Elias allowed himself a small smile. "One night," he whispered. "That's all you need, one night and you're safe." He knew it would not be easy. Rules and regulations would not bend for compassion alone. The station's authorities might discover the aliens, and there could be consequences for him. But at that moment, he did not care. He had made a choice, and for the first time in a long while, he felt truly human. As the morning light slowly began to seep through the station's windows, painting the walls with pale gold, Elias felt a sense of hope. Perhaps this small act of kindness could grow into something larger. Perhaps humanity could still remember what it meant to care, to protect, and to share warmth with those who had none. And for the mother and child, the station was no longer a cold, empty place. It had become a refuge, a small island of safety in a vast, indifferent galaxy. For tonight, at least, they had a place to belong, and that was enough. The universe outside remained vast and unforgiving, but within the small walls of the frontier station, something had changed. A human had reached out, and in doing so had reminded himself, and perhaps the galaxy, that even in the coldest of places, warmth could be found in the simplest acts of compassion. The first part of the story ended not with a dramatic battle or a thrilling escape, but with something subtler and more profound. A quiet, human choice that would set in motion events no one could yet imagine. The next morning, the frontier station seemed quieter than usual. The hum of the life support systems was steady, but the corridors held an almost nervous stillness, as if the station itself were aware of the secret visitors in the small apartment. Elias Ward moved carefully through the halls, checking the temperature and machinery, but his mind kept drifting back to the alien mother and child. He wondered how they had survived the night and whether their energy had been enough to keep them warm. He entered his quarters and found them awake. The mother was already tending to the small cot, adjusting blankets around the child. Her hands moved slowly, almost delicately, and yet there was precision in every motion. Elias watched as she hummed a soft, melodic tune. It was unlike anything he had ever heard, and he realized she was communicating in the way her species did best, through vibration, tone, and subtle gestures. The child, small and fragile, peeked out from behind the mother. His large eyes were bright, curious, and cautious at the same time. When he noticed Elias, he tilted his head slightly and smiled shyly. There was a warmth in that small gesture that made Elias' chest feel heavy with something he could not name. He had spent years following orders, maintaining equipment, and keeping things running. But this quiet moment of connection was something entirely different. "Good morning," Elias said softly. "How did you sleep?" The mother's eyes met his, and for a moment words were not needed. Elias understood the message clearly. They had survived the night. They had been cold, hungry, and alone, but they had made it. The small act of human kindness, the offer of warmth and shelter, had made a difference. Elias placed a small tray of food on the table. "You should eat," he said. "It will give you energy for the day." The mother nodded and gestured toward the food. The child stepped forward, cautiously reaching for a small piece of bread. He sniffed it, then took a bite, chewing slowly and carefully. Elias smiled. It was strange to see someone so different respond to something so familiar. Food, warmth, care, they were universal, crossing species, cultures, and worlds. After the meal, Elias decided to show them around the station. He wanted them to feel more at ease, to understand that this place, while empty and cold, was still a place of safety. The mother followed closely, the child holding her hand tightly. Elias explained the basic systems, pointing out the lights, the ventilation, and the emergency protocols. Though they could not understand his words completely, they listened intently, absorbing every movement and gesture. As they walked through the corridors, Elias noticed how their presence affected the station. The mother's natural warmth seemed to stabilize small fluctuations in the temperature. Sensors he had not touched in years showed readings within safe ranges. It was subtle, but Elias realized something remarkable. Their biology was not just fragile. It was adaptive, capable of interacting with human technology in ways he had never imagined. "You're helping," he said quietly, more to himself than to them. "You're keeping this place alive." The mother looked at him, her eyes wide and luminous. She reached out, touching a console lightly. A small panel lit up and the room's temperature rose slightly. The child clapped softly, amazed. Elias chuckled. For a moment, the boundaries between human and alien seemed to blur. They were partners in survival, working together, even without words. By mid-morning, Elias decided to test the limits of their capabilities. He opened the main temperature control room, where the life support system struggled to keep the larger station warm. The system was old and inefficient, and the recent cold snap had pushed it close to failure. He gestured for the mother to step inside. She hesitated, then entered, followed closely by the child. He watched as she moved toward the central console. Her hands glowed faintly, and the temperature readings slowly began to rise. The room became noticeably warmer, and the hum of the life support system seemed steadier. Elias was stunned. The mother was doing more than helping. She was improving the station's system simply by being there. "This is incredible," he whispered. "You're not just surviving, you're helping." The mother looked at him again, and he thought he saw a faint smile. The child reached for a small lever on the console, imitating what the mother had done. Elias laughed softly. "Careful," he said. "You might break something." But the child only giggled and pressed the lever gently. The readings remained steady. Elias realized then that this family, though small and vulnerable, had a kind of intelligence and adaptability that humans respected and valued deeply. It was a reminder of what humanity had always prided itself on: curiosity, ingenuity, and the ability to adapt in ways others could not. Hours passed. Elias continued to guide them through the station, showing them the basic functions, letting them explore while keeping them safe. He could see the mother teaching the child, pointing to objects, demonstrating subtle techniques to interact with the environment. It was fascinating, watching them learn, adapt, and respond. Every small gesture carried meaning. Every movement was purposeful. By afternoon, the station's corridors seemed almost alive. The warmth from the mother and child spread subtly, affecting even distant rooms. Machines operated more smoothly, sensors stabilized, and even the lights seemed brighter. Elias felt a mix of awe and pride. He had not only offered shelter, he had discovered allies in the most unexpected form. During a brief pause, Elias sat with them in the small living area. He noticed the mother studying a human tool, a small multi-tool that he often used for repairs. She handled it carefully, tilting it, observing its mechanisms. Elias realized she was learning, understanding human technology not by words, but through observation and experimentation. "You're clever," he said softly. The words seemed strange but necessary. "You can learn anything if you try." The mother's eyes met his. There was gratitude there, yes, but also something more profound: recognition. Recognition that humans, despite their flaws, could see and value intelligence, creativity, and survival instinct in beings unlike themselves. The child looked up, wide-eyed, and Elias felt a surge of hope. Perhaps these small, quiet acts could change perceptions in the future. Later, Elias suggested they rest. "You need energy," he said. "It's a long night ahead and we may need all our strength." The mother nodded and led the child back to the cot. Elias watched them settle in. Their glow dimmed slightly and their breathing became steady and calm. He realized that for them, survival was not just about warmth and food, it was about trust. They had chosen in a small but meaningful way to trust a human, and that trust was sacred. Elias walked to the window looking out at the stars. The frontier was harsh, cold, and often unforgiving. Yet here in this abandoned station, something extraordinary was happening. Humanity had reached out, offered warmth and protection, and been met with something equally extraordinary in return. The hours passed slowly. Outside, meteors streaked across the black sky, distant and indifferent. But inside, the station was alive with quiet cooperation. Elias checked the systems repeatedly, ensuring that the temperature remained stable, that the life support system functioned correctly. Every time he glanced at the mother and child, he saw the impact of their presence, the subtle increase in warmth, the steadiness of the station's sensors, the comfort that filled the air. By evening, Elias realized something important. The mother and child were not merely passive recipients of human kindness. They were active participants. Their biology, intelligence, and instincts complemented his efforts in ways he could never have imagined. He understood then that humanity's greatest strength was not machines, technology, or rules. It was the ability to connect, to cooperate, and to recognize the value of life in any form. As the station's lights dimmed for the night, Elias prepared a small area for them to rest safely. He adjusted the heating vents, placed extra blankets on the cot, and set a small lamp nearby. The mother and child settled in, their glow filling the small space with a gentle warmth. Elias felt a rare sense of peace. He took a seat in his chair, keeping a quiet watch. The events of the day had been extraordinary in their simplicity. A human offering warmth, a mother and child responding with cooperation and care. Yet in that simplicity, there was a profound lesson. The universe was vast, harsh, and often indifferent, but small acts of kindness could change everything. As the night deepened, Elias whispered softly to himself, "Tomorrow we'll face more challenges, but tonight we survive together." And for the first time in many months, he felt truly connected, not just to the station, not just to his duties, but to something larger, the fragile, precious web of life that spans species, stars, and worlds. In that small frontier station, humanity's true nature was quietly revealed, not through conquest, not through power, but through warmth, cooperation, and the courage to act with compassion, even when the rules said otherwise. The frontier station had never felt so quiet, and yet so tense. Days had passed since Elias had welcomed the alien mother and child into his quarters, and for the most part, the station seemed peaceful. The mother and child had adapted quickly, learning the rhythms of the small outpost and exploring its corridors under Elias' careful supervision. It was a fragile peace, one built on trust and quiet cooperation, and Elias knew it could not last forever. As the sun rose over the distant stars, Elias moved through the station's corridors, checking the temperature and power systems. Everything seemed normal, but his instincts warned him otherwise. The sensors were picking up fluctuations outside the station, small but unusual. The control panel blinked erratically for a moment before stabilizing, as though the station itself were shivering from the cold beyond its walls. He frowned. The readings suggested a stellar storm approaching, a rare but dangerous phenomenon in this part of space. Stellar storms were unpredictable, capable of disrupting communications, damaging life support systems, and leaving stations vulnerable. Elias knew that if the storm hit, the station's heating system might fail completely. And that meant the mother and child, along with him, could be in serious danger. He hurried back to his quarters. The mother was already awake, tending to the small cot where the child had been resting. When she saw Elias, her glowing eyes widened slightly, sensing the urgency in his expression. She tilted her head, a subtle gesture asking what was happening. Elias tried to explain, pointing to the sensors and the control panel. She did not understand his words, but her attention sharpened. "The storm is coming," he said slowly, emphasizing the danger with gestures and pointing at the readings. "We must prepare, keep warm, stay safe." The mother nodded. Her instincts took over. She moved toward the vents and consoles, her glowing hands adjusting the temperature and stabilizing systems where she could. Elias watched in awe as she worked, realizing that she understood the station in ways he could not. Her body seemed attuned to the environment, sensing fluctuations in temperature and pressure and correcting them almost instinctively. The child followed her, imitating her gestures with careful attention. Every small movement seemed purposeful, as though the child were learning how to survive in this strange human world. Elias felt a mixture of fear and admiration. These beings were fragile, yet resourceful beyond anything he had expected. As the storm drew closer, the station began to shudder. The corridors rattled, lights flickered, and the hum of the life support system wavered. Elias moved quickly, checking panels and rerouting power to essential systems. The heating system groaned under the strain, struggling to maintain a livable temperature. The mother and child continued to assist in their quiet, instinctive way, glowing faintly as they balanced the fluctuations with their presence. The situation grew more serious by the hour. The storm's impact became stronger, waves of cosmic radiation interfering with the station's sensors and power systems. Outside, meteors and debris streaked across the black sky, invisible through the station's thick walls but sensed in every vibration and shudder. Elias realized that the storm would not only test the station's machinery, it would test them all. He gathered the mother and child in the living quarters, ensuring they had blankets, food, and safe positions near the warmest vents. "Stay close," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "We will get through this together." The mother and child obeyed without hesitation. The child clung to the mother, small hands gripping her glowing fingers. Elias watched them, feeling a deep responsibility settle in his chest. For the first time, he understood that survival was not just about technology or skill. It was about trust, cooperation, and courage. Hours passed, and the storm raged outside. The station trembled, but inside the small quarters there was a quiet determination. Elias worked tirelessly, checking systems, rerouting power, and reinforcing weak points. The mother moved with him, instinctively guiding him to areas that needed attention, while the child assisted in small, careful ways like pressing buttons and watching displays. Despite the chaos, a bond formed between them. Elias realized that the mother and child were more than refugees. They were partners, sharing knowledge and instinct, teaching him to see the station not just as machinery, but as a living system that could be influenced and protected through cooperation. As the storm peaked, a sudden failure shook the station. A vent in the main corridor burst, sending cold air rushing through the halls. Elias felt a chill, but he did not panic. The mother reacted immediately, her hands glowing as she directed warmth toward the corridor. The child followed, placing small hands on the vent, mimicking her actions. Slowly, the temperature stabilized. Elias could hardly believe it. Together, they had corrected the failure without waiting for machines to respond. Elias realized then that this small family was extraordinary. Their survival instincts, adaptability, and intelligence complemented his own skills perfectly. They had no weapons, no advanced tools, and yet they were vital to the station's survival. It was a humbling moment, and he felt pride mixed with gratitude. The storm continued for hours. Lights flickered, alarms beeped intermittently, and debris struck the station's outer walls. Yet inside the small living area, Elias, the mother, and child remained calm, focused on maintaining warmth and safety. Each gesture, each adjustment, each small act of cooperation mattered. As night approached, Elias took a brief moment to rest. He sat in a chair, watching the mother and child work together, their movements synchronized and efficient. Despite the fear and uncertainty outside, there was a quiet determination inside the station. They would survive this night, not because of machines or rules, but because they worked together. Around midnight, the storm reached its fiercest point. The station shuddered violently, and Elias felt the walls vibrate under the impact of cosmic debris. Sensors blinked erratically, showing system failures that needed immediate attention. He sprang into action, moving to the central console, while the mother followed closely, her glowing hands stabilizing the controls. The child assisted where he could, small hands pressing buttons and observing readouts. Hours felt like minutes as they worked. Elias could see exhaustion in his own reflection, but the mother and child seemed tireless, driven by instinct and necessity. Together, they corrected failures, redirected power, and reinforced weak areas. Slowly, the storm's intensity began to diminish. By dawn, the station had survived. The lights stabilized, the hum of the life support system returned to normal, and the temperature held steady. Elias collapsed into a chair, breathing heavily, and looked at the mother and child. They were tired but unharmed. Their glowing eyes reflected relief, gratitude, and quiet pride. For a moment, Elias allowed himself to feel wonder. He had faced many challenges in his life, mechanical failures, difficult missions, and lonely nights in the cold of space, but none had been as profound as this. A human had reached out to help, and in return, he had received help of a kind he could never have imagined. The mother stepped forward, placing a glowing hand on his arm. It was a gesture of thanks, of recognition, of shared victory. Elias understood without words. They had survived because they trusted each other, because they worked together, and because they had dared to hope in the face of fear. The child climbed onto the cot, exhausted, and the mother followed, curling around him protectively. Elias adjusted the blankets and ensured that the vent provided consistent warmth. He sat nearby, watching over them, feeling a sense of quiet fulfillment. The station had survived the storm, and so had they, together. In the hours that followed, Elias reflected on the night's events. The storm had tested more than machinery. It had tested human compassion, alien instinct, and the power of cooperation. He realized that rules and regulations, though important, could not measure the strength of trust and collaboration. Sometimes, survival depended not on technology or authority, but on the willingness to act with courage, empathy, and understanding. By morning, the storm had passed completely. Outside, the stars shone brightly, indifferent to the struggles below, but inside the station, something remarkable had occurred. A small family of aliens and a human had survived a cosmic tempest, not through machines alone, but through shared effort, instinct, and care. Elias allowed himself a small smile. He knew the challenges were far from over. The universe was vast and unpredictable, but for the first time, he felt a profound confidence in the bond he had formed. Together, they could face whatever came next. The mother and child, once frightened and vulnerable, were now active participants in the station's survival. Elias watched them rest, their glowing bodies providing subtle warmth, and felt a deep sense of connection. He had discovered something essential. Humanity's true strength lay not in dominance or rules, but in the ability to recognize value in others, to cooperate across boundaries, and to act with compassion, even when it was difficult. And as the first rays of light touched the station's cold walls, Elias whispered softly to himself, "We survived together, and tomorrow we will face whatever comes next together." The frontier station, once quiet and empty, was now alive. Not because of its machines, but because of the small acts of courage, intelligence, and warmth shared by a human and a family of aliens. That night had tested them all, and they had proven something remarkable. When humans choose compassion, ingenuity, and cooperation, they can survive and thrive in the harshest corners of the galaxy. For Elias, the mother, and the child, the night was not just a test, it was a beginning. The universe outside remained vast, unpredictable, and often indifferent, but inside the station they had created something extraordinary, a bond that could withstand storms, challenges, and the coldest reaches of space. The frontier station was quiet once more, but the atmosphere was heavy with tension. The stellar storm had passed, leaving the station shaken but intact. Elias Ward moved through the corridors, checking every system and panel with meticulous care. The temperature was stable now, and life support systems hummed steadily. Yet his mind remained alert, knowing that the night's chaos had revealed both vulnerabilities and strengths within the station, and within himself. The alien mother and child had returned to the living quarters, resting after the long hours of cooperation during the storm. Their bodies glowed faintly in the dim light, a subtle warmth that spread through the room. Elias observed them quietly, reflecting on the past day's events. Their survival had been extraordinary, not because of technology alone, but because of their instinct, intelligence, and the bond that had formed between them and him. Elias knew that what they had accomplished together could not stay a secret for long. The station's communications had partially failed during the storm, but now that systems were stabilized, external sensors were recalibrating. The station's authorities, or anyone monitoring nearby sectors would notice irregular activity. And when they did, Elias would have to make a difficult choice. He walked to the small observation deck, looking out at the black expanse of space. Meteors still drifted silently in the distance, and the stars twinkled coldly, indifferent to the lives below. Yet Elias felt a quiet determination. The aliens had trusted him, and he could not betray that trust. No rule, protocol, or regulation could justify abandoning them now. He returned to the living quarters and found the mother tending to the child, who was drawing small shapes on the floor with a glowing fingertip. Elias knelt beside them. "We may have visitors soon," he said softly. "Authorities might arrive to check the station. We must be ready." The mother tilted her head, understanding the gravity of his tone. Though she did not comprehend his words fully, her instincts told her that danger was approaching. She stood, adjusting the child's blankets, and Elias felt a surge of respect. This small family, so different from him, had already demonstrated courage, intelligence, and compassion. Now they were preparing to face a new challenge, one that could decide their fate. By midday, the rescue fleet arrived. Sleek human ships emerged from the darkness, their engines leaving faint streaks of light against the black sky. The fleet had detected irregular readings from the station during the storm, and they were here to investigate. Elias watched from the observation deck as the ships docked, preparing for inspection teams to enter the station. Elias knew that hiding the aliens was no longer an option. If discovered, they could face serious consequences, immediate removal, quarantine, or worse. But he also knew that revealing the truth could demonstrate something remarkable, that humans were capable of compassion, trust, and cooperation beyond protocol. He led the mother and child to the main corridor, explaining through gestures that they must remain calm. The aliens followed, their glowing forms moving quietly, their eyes alert. Elias adjusted his uniform, preparing to meet the inspection team. The moment of truth had arrived. The inspection team entered, their boots echoing in the metallic corridors. They were efficient, serious, and strictly professional. Elias stepped forward, gesturing for them to follow him to the living quarters. Inside, the mother and child waited quietly. Elias took a deep breath. "They are here," he said, indicating the aliens. "They helped save the station during the storm. They are not a threat." The inspection leader raised an eyebrow. "Aliens, without clearance, this is a serious violation of protocol, Ward. You could face disciplinary action." Elias met the officer's gaze firmly. "Yes," he admitted, "but they also saved lives. They stabilized the station when the storm hit. Without them, this station might have failed completely." The officer stepped closer, scrutinizing the aliens. The mother remained calm, her glowing hands folded gently in front of her. The child clung to her side, curious but quiet. Elias could see the subtle ways they had influenced the station systems, small stabilizations, temperature corrections, and instinctive repairs that had prevented disaster. "Interesting," the officer said slowly. "You're claiming that unregistered aliens contributed to the station's survival?" "Yes," Elias said. "They were crucial, and I am willing to take responsibility for allowing them here, but I believe their actions deserve recognition, not punishment." The officer looked at him for a long moment, then at the mother and child. He activated a handheld device, scanning the aliens' energy signatures, their unique biological patterns, and the subtle interactions with the station. The results were clear. The aliens had indeed stabilized several critical systems during the storm. "This is unprecedented," the officer admitted. "It appears that your actions, Ward, and the presence of these beings directly contributed to the station's survival." "Protocol does not account for this kind of cooperation." Elias nodded. "Sometimes survival requires looking beyond protocol. Sometimes humanity must act with compassion, even when rules suggest otherwise." The inspection team remained silent for a moment, digesting the situation. Finally, the officer spoke. "We will report this as an extraordinary case. Your judgment, Ward, has prevented disaster, and these aliens, they will be granted temporary protection and observation status. Further decisions will be made at higher levels." Relief washed over Elias. He exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of tension lift from his shoulders. The mother and child remained still, their eyes bright with cautious hope. Elias gestured toward them. "It's all right," he said softly. "You are safe for now." As the inspection team completed their work, Elias reflected on the events of the past days. The storm had tested not only the station systems, but also the limits of human compassion, intelligence, and cooperation. The aliens had proven their adaptability and resourcefulness, while he had demonstrated the courage to act beyond protocol. Together, they had faced danger and emerged victorious. The mother stepped forward, placing a glowing hand on Elias's arm. It was a gesture of gratitude, trust, and recognition. Elias felt a profound connection. In that moment, he understood something essential. Humanity's true power lay not in rules, technology, or authority, but in the ability to see value, to act with compassion, and to cooperate with others, even when they were different. The child reached out to touch Elias's hand, their small fingers glowing faintly. Elias smiled and clasped them gently. The bond they had formed was real, tangible, and unbreakable. In the harshness of space, in the cold and loneliness of the frontier, they had found warmth in each other. As the day continued, the rescue fleet prepared to depart, leaving the station stable and secure. The mother and child remained under observation, their status now officially recognized. Elias walked with them through the corridors, ensuring that everything was in order. He felt a deep sense of pride and fulfillment. Together, they had survived the storm, faced authority, and demonstrated the power of cooperation and compassion. By evening, the station settled into quiet normalcy. The mother and child rested near the vents, their glow providing subtle warmth. Elias prepared a small area for them to eat and relax. Though the storm was over and the inspection complete, he knew their journey was far from finished. The universe was vast and unpredictable, and challenges would come again. Yet, for the first time, Elias felt certain of something. Humanity had the power to make a difference not through dominance or technology alone, but through understanding, courage, and the willingness to act with compassion. He had seen it firsthand. The mother and child had shown him the importance of trust, adaptability, and mutual support. Together, they had created something extraordinary, a small, fragile community capable of surviving the harshest conditions. As night fell, Elias stood by the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The frontier stretched endlessly, dark and silent, but he felt a quiet hope. The storm had tested them, but it had also revealed the potential for humans to connect, cooperate, and protect life in all its forms. He knew that the choices made here, simple acts of warmth, courage, and trust, could ripple outward, influencing future decisions, policies, and the way humanity interacted with the universe. The mother approached him, her glowing hand reaching out in a silent gesture of thanks. Elias took it gently, feeling the warmth spread through him. The child followed, placing a small hand on his shoulder. Together they stood in quiet companionship, a human and a small family of aliens bound by survival, trust, and shared courage. Elias whispered softly, "Tomorrow we will continue. Together we can face whatever comes next." In that moment he understood something profound. Humanity was not defined by rules, machines, or authority. Humanity was defined by the choices made in the quiet moments of courage, compassion, and understanding. By choosing to protect, to cooperate, and to see value in others, humans could redefine themselves, and in doing so, change the galaxy. And as the frontier station glowed softly in the darkness, a small human and a family of aliens had proven something extraordinary, that even in the harshest reaches of space, humanity could shine not through force, but through heart. The frontier station had returned to a quiet rhythm. The stellar storm was far behind them, leaving only traces of its power in the slight dents on the outer walls and the shivering echo of metal in the corridors. Elias Ward walked slowly through the station, checking systems that had been stabilized not by machines alone, but by the remarkable cooperation of a human and a family of aliens. Each panel, each light, each hum of the life support system reminded him of the nights they had survived together. The mother and child were awake in the living quarters, tending to the small cot where they had rested. Their glow was soft but steady, a quiet sign of life and vitality. Elias observed them with a deep sense of pride. He had seen them adapt, survive, and contribute to the station's operation in ways he could never have imagined. They had taught him that life in any form held intelligence, courage, and value. News arrived from the higher command of the frontier fleet. The unusual readings during the storm, combined with Elias' report, had reached the attention of senior authorities. They were curious, perhaps skeptical, but willing to investigate. Elias knew that this visit would be important, not only for the aliens' safety, but for the example it could set. Humanity had acted with compassion, and now it had a chance to be recognized for it. By midday, the command inspection team arrived. Sleek vessels docked outside, their presence both reassuring and intimidating. Elias guided the mother and child to a safe area within the living quarters. "Stay calm," he said softly. "This is important. We are not hiding anymore. We are showing them the truth." The senior officers entered, scanning the station and reviewing reports. Elias led them through the corridors, pointing out the areas where the storm had caused failures and where the aliens had contributed to recovery. The mother and child followed quietly, their movements careful, their glowing forms subtle but noticeable. One officer, a tall human with a stern expression, spoke first. "Ward, your report is unusual. You claim that unregistered aliens were instrumental in stabilizing the station during the storm. Is that correct?" "Yes," Elias replied calmly. "They helped save the station. Without them, several systems would have failed. They acted with intelligence, courage, and care. I take full responsibility for allowing them to remain here." The officer nodded slowly, reviewing the data on his handheld device. "The readings are clear," he said. "These aliens, despite lacking clearance, interacted with the station's systems in a way that stabilized temperature and life support functions. Their contribution is undeniable." Elias watched the mother, who remained calm, her glowing hands folded lightly in front of her. The child stayed close to her side, curiosity in his eyes but no fear. Elias realized that they understood in their own way that this moment mattered. Their presence could redefine how humans and alien species interacted in the future. "Your judgment," the officer continued, "is unusual, Ward. Allowing unregistered beings to remain here could have serious consequences. Yet in this case, it appears your decision prevented disaster. We must consider the implications carefully." The officers moved closer, observing the mother and child more directly. They scanned their energy signatures, their subtle interactions with the station, and the evidence of their actions during the storm. It was clear, these beings were not a threat. They were intelligent, resourceful, and capable of cooperation that directly contributed to human safety. "This is remarkable," another officer said. "We have rarely seen such integration between humans and aliens, particularly in a survival scenario. Their actions demonstrate qualities we value highly: adaptability, intelligence, and courage." Elias felt a quiet satisfaction. Humanity had often been measured by rules, protocols, and technology, but this recognition went deeper. It acknowledged the power of compassion, trust, and cooperation, qualities that defined humanity at its best. The senior officer stepped closer. "Ward, the station's future will be documented as a case study. Your actions and these beings' contributions will be considered when creating new policies regarding alien refugees and interspecies cooperation. You have set a precedent." Relief washed over Elias. He had feared reprimand or punishment, but instead, he found acknowledgement. More importantly, the mother and child were safe, their presence now officially recognized. Elias gestured to them. "It is safe now," he said softly. The mother approached him, placing her glowing hand gently on his arm. It was a gesture of gratitude, trust, and recognition. The child followed, touching his shoulder lightly. Elias smiled. Together, they had created something extraordinary, a small community built on cooperation, trust, and survival. After the inspection team departed, Elias took the mother and child through the station once more. He showed them the areas that had been repaired, the vents that had been stabilized, and the systems that now ran smoothly thanks to their combined efforts. The child's eyes sparkled with wonder, fascinated by the machines and the lights. The mother observed with calm attentiveness, learning more about human systems with every step. Elias realized that this day marked a turning point. Humanity had a chance to redefine its approach to alien life, not through dominance, fear, or strict enforcement of rules, but through recognition, cooperation, and compassion. He thought of the countless species displaced by wars, policies, and cosmic events. Perhaps this small act of inclusion could inspire something larger, a way for humans to act as protectors rather than conquerors. By evening, the station settled into a calm routine. The mother and child rested near the vents, their glow filling the space with subtle warmth. Elias prepared a small meal for them, observing the quiet interactions between them. Their trust in him had deepened, and he felt a profound sense of responsibility. He understood that their survival, and the survival of others like them, depended not only on his actions but on the choices humanity made in the future. Elias walked to the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The universe was vast, cold, and often indifferent, but he felt hope. The frontier had tested them all, revealing both the fragility and strength of life. Humanity had proven that even in the harshest environments, courage, intelligence, and compassion could make a difference. The mother approached him, her glowing hand reaching out in a silent gesture of thanks. Elias took it gently, feeling warmth spread through him. The child followed, placing a small hand on his shoulder. Together, they stood in quiet companionship, a human and a family of aliens bound by trust, survival, and mutual respect. In the following days, the station received additional supplies and support from the frontier fleet. Policies regarding alien refugees were revisited, informed by the extraordinary events of the storm. Humanity began to see that survival and cooperation could extend beyond species boundaries, and that compassion was not weakness but strength. Elias continued to work alongside the mother and child, teaching them more about human technology and learning from their instincts and adaptations. Their bond grew stronger, a living example of what humanity could achieve when it chose to act with understanding rather than fear. One night, as the stars glittered beyond the station's reinforced windows, Elias reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the moment he had discovered the mother and child hiding in the abandoned corridors to the night of the storm, he had witnessed courage, intelligence, and compassion in action. Their survival was proof that even in the coldest, most indifferent parts of space, warmth could be found in connection. He whispered softly, "We did it! We survived together!" The mother and child responded with soft gestures of acknowledgement, their glowing forms illuminating the small room. Elias realized that this was not the end of their journey, it was the beginning. Together, they would continue to explore, survive, and demonstrate what humanity could be at its best. In the weeks that followed, the story of the frontier station spread throughout the fleet. Reports detailed the unusual cooperation between humans and aliens, highlighting the value of compassion, trust, and ingenuity. Policies were updated to allow for greater inclusion and protection of displaced alien species, influenced by the extraordinary events at the station. Elias received recognition for his actions, but he considered the greatest achievement to be the safety and trust of the mother and child. They had proven that intelligence, courage, and cooperation could cross species boundaries, and that humanity's true power lay in its willingness to act with heart. The mother and child were granted official status, allowed to remain at the station under observation, and gradually integrated into the small human community. Their presence became a symbol, a reminder that even the smallest acts of compassion could have ripple effects across the galaxy. Elias stood on the observation deck once more, watching the stars. The frontier stretched endlessly, but he felt a profound connection to the universe and to life itself. Humanity had survived storms, faced moral choices, and emerged stronger, not because of machines or technology alone, but because of the ability to see value in others, to act with courage, and to cooperate across differences. The mother stepped beside him, glowing faintly in the dim light. The child climbed onto the railing, eyes bright with curiosity. Elias smiled. Together, they represented something extraordinary, the potential of humanity to act with wisdom, compassion, and heart, even in the coldest reaches of space. As the first rays of distant stars touched the station, Elias whispered softly, "We are not alone. And together we can face anything." In that moment, the frontier station was more than a collection of metal and machines. It was a testament to the power of cooperation, trust, and human spirit. A small human and a family of aliens had shown that survival, compassion, and understanding could change not only lives, but policies, cultures, and the way the galaxy viewed humanity. And in the quiet glow of the station, a profound truth shone clearly. When humanity chooses warmth over fear, cooperation over isolation, and compassion over indifference, it becomes a force capable of lighting even the darkest corners of the universe.